Hello again, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and we are in part two of our Trident T11713 cluster series build. We have most of the motor mount built at this point. It's nice and dry, and I've taken the liberty of threading this, which is a bulkhead of sorts, through the bit of thread that we had here. Now, this was a little difficult because this part of the thread kind of came unwound a little bit. So I had to mess with that a little bit so I could thread it through this narrow hole, but it is in place and it is ready for the next step. Now, these aren't supposed to, this is just supposed to be a bulkhead. It's not supposed to like have the tubes actually slide through the little holes. So we're not going to have to worry about that. What we do need to do though is glue it in place. So now that we have it threaded, we can actually go about gluing it. I think I'm going to glue the wood, just being careful not to get glue on the outside, because it's pretty difficult to glue just on the tubes. So I'm going to try to put most of the glue in the middle here where there's the most wood. And then I'm going to use my dowel here on my stick to kind of brush it in place as best as I can everywhere else. And I'm probably going to need to get a bit more, um, which is fine. I'd rather start with too little and be able to add out rather than have a big old blob somewhere. Instead of using my usual bit of cardboard to do this, I'm just going to apply the glue directly here since I need it anyway. And it's just about done. The only thing I want to be careful of here is I don't want to get any on the outside, because if I get it on the outside, that could mess with the fit into the finished product. So I'm going to thread it on here, and then I'm going to make sure the holes line up. And as it turns out, just kind of how it fell, that looks pretty good as is. Let's just make sure. And we'll push down a little bit to make sure that we've got a good fit. Now the tubes, I don't think were 100% as lined up as they could have been, which is unfortunate, but there's not much we could do about that at this point. And really, I was more interested in having the ends line up than anything else. So what we need to be careful is we don't want anything protruding beyond the edge of the tube or beyond the edge of the bulkhead. That's kind of our biggest concern, because if it's too wide there, it won't fit into the body. And we do have a little bit sticking out here and there. I think generally that's pretty good. I'm going to let that dry. Now, there are a couple other steps. We eventually need to attach the actual shock cord. Now, I mean, this is way too small, too short of a string to actually be a shock cord. We will need to do something about that, but we will deal with that later. I'm going to do that probably not quite before I paint it, but pretty close. We also can't put the finished product into the body tube just quite yet either, because it needs to dry first. So we will give that a pause. What we will do though is we will continue building this payload section. So we glued the eye hook in last time. This is going to go in like this. And there's actually a decent amount of construction we need to do for this thing. The instructions say, after we have this built anyway, that we are going to put a bead of glue just on the inside here, because we're going to push it farther in. So I'm just painting a little bit of glue on the inside here with the nozzle of my glue. And there it goes. It says to allow this to be tacky. This is like when we do a fin construction and we put on 2 layers. So we're going to wait for a little bit for this to firm up a little bit, about 90 seconds, 30 seconds, I think actually would be fine. While that's going on, I will show you that I've taken care of most of the fins. This one could actually use a bit of reshaping here on the edge. I have not only rounded the lead and trail ends, but I've also beveled the root, as it says in the instructions, which again is kind of an odd thing to be doing, but it needs it in this instruction. So here's how I went about beveling things. Uh, Frequently, I just use my sanding block, but if you have a nice piece of sandpaper, you hold it down. This is my root edge, and we want it to be essentially a 45-degree angle. So we'll just hold the piece of wood at a 45-degree angle and then just hold it this way and go back and forth. Eventually, you will start taking off a decent amount of the edge, and have a look. You're going to obviously have to do this on both sides. I didn't do a very even job, as it turns out. This end didn't really have anything taken off, and the other end did. So in looking at it, I have now made a bit of an angle. Of course, to bevel it, I need to do the same thing to the other side. So flip it around and do the same thing, and do your best to hold it at approximately the same angle. You need to remove essentially the same amount of material from each side. Otherwise, you will not have a nice even bevel. You will have one that's leaning, too far one way or the other. Now, mine, either through some irregularity in the wood or the sandpaper, it's too far on one side and not enough on the other. So I'm kind of trying to not adjust the decent part of it too much. Now, hopefully you can see something at this point, but I've made a decent attempt at a 45-degree angle here, so that's pretty good. All right, so we'll put that away for a minute. I'm going to put some more glue on this, back to the payload section. Another bead, and you'll notice I'm not brushing this out. I probably will after this layer, so it is as even as it gets. That should be good. Spread things out a bit. And we want to keep it close to the edge, though, because this thing only needs to go in a quarter of an inch. Now it says approximately, so we're not going to get too bent out of shape about it, but we'll put it in. It's not going to take, the whole eyelet is not going to disappear, but I want to at least get a ballpark figure for how close I am. So a quarter of an inch that's pretty good. Now, obviously, I can't get my ruler in there. If you have a thinner ruler, you might be able to. It looks about right. And again, it only says approximately, so we're not going to worry too much about that. The only thing we really want to do is make sure that the disc in there, the bulkhead, is perpendicular to the tube, which isn't always the case. So have a look and make sure that one edge isn't rising up more than the other. And as I'm bumping this, I am screwing it up. So there we go. All right, so that's good for now. This calls for a lot of glue on this. It says once this is set, it doesn't need to be perfectly dry, we'll put some more on there. It says apply another layer of glue inside the coupler tube on top of the plate and the threaded portion of the eye screw. So that sounds like it wants me to kind of just like soak this whole thing with glue, which I'm not entirely sure why we're going to do that. I assume for extra strength, but I'm going to let that sit for a little bit and cure up for the moment. In the meantime, I actually do need to measure on this thing, on the bulkhead here. Or not the bulkhead, the payload. It says I need to measure 1.25 inches. It's at 2.25 inches, so I'm leaving an inch essentially. And I'm measuring it from the edge that does not have the eye hook in it. So that should be approximately here. And it is very clear. I should mark it in 3 places, because if I don't do this right, it says that it'll compromise the exhaust port, which is this hole. And if that's covered up, this would get ugly. We don't want that. So we want to measure 1.25 inches all the way around, and we're going to do a good job to make sure that we get this thing sufficiently far into its tube when the time comes to do that. All right, this is probably set enough that we can start soaking it in glue. So I'm just going to, actually, I seem to have adjusted it again a little bit. I can push my finger through at this point to try to get everything just right. That looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to just kind of put a ring of glue here and then maybe a bit more on the outside, because I'm interested more than anything else in getting a decent joint The instructions do make it clear that they want you to do that as well. So I'm going to brush this kind of just thinly out. And it says paying close attention to the threaded part and also to the joint. So I'm going to just try to get the glue mostly in place, and then I'm going to use my finger to smooth it out in the joint, if I can get it in there. One of the drawbacks of having ham hands. There we go. Spread that out. And now I'm going to spin it like so to make sure that I'm getting it. You probably can't see, but like so to make sure I'm getting it into the crack. I don't really want it too far up if I can help it. I think at this point, it's somewhat unavoidable. There are my glue hands. It wants us to do that. Actually, that's enough. And then it eventually says we're going to apply glue to the underside of it as well. But let's let that set for a little bit, because we don't need to be tempting fate and having glue drip the wrong direction. Anyway, while that's doing it, I figured I would also demonstrate how I'm going to round these edges. So I beveled the root, but I also need to round the leading edge here. We've got a sanding block. The easiest way, for me at least, to do this is I'm going to hold this in my hand and I'm going to round over like so. Now, the basswood is harder to shape, I think, than balsa. So this is going to take longer. And as fun as it is to watch me sand, I've already done the other ones. That actually did a decent job to start, but you can see that the cut wood is dark. When I rounded the other ones, I didn't really make a whole lot of progress into the dark cut part, which means I didn't really round a whole lot. I only rounded like just the edges, and I still had a flat section in the middle, which I don't really want. So basically that just means I need to round more. So even though I might like the shape looking down on it like this, yeah, it's a decent shape right now on both ends, but I've got so much of this dark material here that it means the middle didn't really get shaped very much. So I'll just have to hope I can get the shape back after rounding this, sufficiently. And shape some more. Shape. Very exciting to watch, no doubt. Anyway, it's getting better. It still needs some more work, but I'm not going to do all that on camera because who'd want to watch? All right, so anyway, now we need to put some glue on the underside of this. I can reach my finger in there, I guess, so I will do that at some point. But the real problem is I can't just leave it standing upright because it's got the eye hook, and that's kind of problematic. So I will try to get some glue in there. I really can't see what I'm doing right now, so I'm more or less just pouring glue in a hole. Good times. I got my stick. I'm going to spread it out, try to get it into the corners, and to make sure that I've got pretty much the whole thing at least partially covered. Again, I'm not really going to be able to see what I'm doing when I stick my finger down there, so hopefully it'll be pretty good. I'll have to look and see after the fact, which is kind of annoying. And I'm just spinning the tube, and that actually looks pretty good. I took a decent amount out of the middle, unfortunately, in the process. I'm going to try to readjust that back with my smaller finger. But I'm more interested in the joint again than anything else. So upside down, I guess it goes. I probably shouldn't have it upside down, but because the glue will leak out, ironically. But we'll get that sorted in a minute. I got to find basically some place to put this that's supportive. And frequently, I like to put things inside of tape rings, but this is obviously too big. The best I could do is, this is a body tube. That would be the right size. Maybe a cradle. I have a bunch of these cradles that came from other kits, so I'll just leave it there for the time being. All right, so that's probably about as much as I can do right now because I really want this to set before I do anything else with it. So the next bit is going to have to wait until that's like completely cured. And I actually have a little more sanding to do anyway. You don't want to watch that. So I will catch up to you in the next part of the video. See you then.